Welcome to another episode of the Jesus Way podcast. We're so excited that you guys are here. Again, you guys, this podcast is all about Jesus. We believe that He's the way, the truth, and the life. And the guests that we have on, every topic that we talk about, it's all pointing to Him. And today we have a special guest, actually in the studio today, not on Zoom. It's our friend Lana Vasquez. Yay. Lana, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Lana, this podcast, I entitled it because I heard it from one of your messages, but it's called Rescued to Rescue, which I think is so amazing. Yes. Rescued to Rescue. Yeah, so we want to know a little bit about who you are. Just give us a brief intro about who's Lana Vasquez, where you grew up, because actually you're not too far from here, from where we're actually recording. And just tell us a little bit about like what you do, what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So born and raised in Southern California, and my mom's in Camarillo. I mean, just Ventura County girl all the way. Simi Valley, my whole family. I have family members off every exit in Simi Valley, and this whole area, just family all over the place. And
I was actually just at your church, New Beginnings, that you grew up at, right? The small
I got
church.
saved there.
You got saved.
Yes, little itty bitty church. I actually got saved from Victory Outreach in Eagle Rock at an outreach event, but my aunt had become a Christian 6 months before and went to that church, and she was the only Christian I knew, so I wanted her to disciple me. Wow. So she brought me to that church, and so that was the church I just got my foundational upbringing. I didn't know any other Christians or any other church, so that was the church I was raised up in at 19 as a Christian. That was the first Christian church I had ever experienced or went to. And so went there, and it was funny because I had never I didn't even know the children's Bible stories, and I would within 3 months I was a Sunday school teacher, and so I'd have to go and read the children's stories and then go and teach it. So I was learning it with the kids, youth leader within 6 months, and God just did a really quick work. But this was the area that I was raised in, and I just that's part of my heart is being raised in this area. I never heard the gospel. Nobody ever invited me to church. I thought I had all the Jesus there was, and that's part of my personal story of starting Life Impact International. Is I believe that my life was impacted at 19 at a very young age, and I believe that it just takes one. If one life is impacted, then that life has the potential to change other lives, and those lives have the potential to change other lives, and it's like a ripple effect. And so our whole motto is change a life, change the world, Life Impact International, because I was that one life that was changed at 19 years old in this region, in Ventura County, in an area where I didn't know one Christian before, one believer before.
That is amazing. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then our mutual friend, Janet Rovner and Mike, I heard the backstory when you were preaching at New Beginnings is that she gave, was it her couch money or something?
Yes.
When she was struggling back then with income, but she gave it to you to go on a trip to Thailand. And that's when God inspired you to start everything that you were doing there with Life Impact International, right?
Yes, okay, yes. Yeah. So Janet Rovner, Mike and Janet Rovner, I knew them when Janet Rovner was just a hairstylist. That's what it was. Yeah. And now for people who don't know, she has one of the largest salons in Moore Park in Ventura County in our area. But it's neat. Janet, I've known them since I was 19. And Janet Rovner, I answered an altar call at that church. And when I turned around for prayer, it was Janet Rovner. And so God just connected our hearts since then, her and Mike. And I just remember they were even though they were parents and different things, they'd always throw, back in the day when you could do this, they'd throw all the youth back in their truck and take us to Dodger games. Yes. And since I was a youth leader, they were just so cool and fun and awesome. But anyways, Janet, so we always had such a special heart connection because she was the one that prayed for me to change my life when my life was changed. And she as well, her testimony is Mike Rovner was her drug dealer. Yeah. And she was on drugs and she got radically saved.
That is such a crazy story.
And then they both got saved. She brought him to church, and now, I mean, they're amazing, right? And so she understood what I was going through at that time. God connected our heart, but then later on, I didn't know God would use her a second time in such a great way. I was getting ready to go to Thailand. I was on a mission trip. I only committed 2 months. We were going to start a rescue home, the first rescue home. That's the first time I started hearing about child trafficking. 8-year-olds virginity going for about $3,000. Started hearing about this, knowing we needed to do something about it. I only committed 2 months at that time because I thought I'd go to Brazil and work with the street kids in Brazil. Yeah. And so on my way to Thailand, I needed $1,000 to pay for my ticket. And I was flying back and I didn't have that money yet. And Janet Rovner came up to me in the parking lot crying with a thick envelope. And she said, "Here you go. This is for the rescuing of children." And I said, "Thank you." And I still didn't know. I was discouraged. I thought I wasn't going to go to Thailand. I didn't have $1,000. I had 24 hours to pay off my ticket. And so I just was super discouraged. I said, "Thank you. That's it." I sat in the car and I counted it. It was 10 $100 bills. It was the exact money I needed to get to buy my ticket for Thailand. But what I didn't know was that day she was saving her couch money, and she would save $100 bills. And every time she'd go to buy a couch, God would tell her to give it to a single mom because she remembers what it was like being a single mom before. And so she never had built it up because she'd always give it away to single moms. And finally, she built up $1,000 to go and buy that couch after the church service. But while I was speaking about Thailand and the atrocities of the children, all of a sudden she heard God say, "Give Lana your couch money." And so she went to the bathroom of the foyer, this little bathroom, got on her knees, and she said, "This is for the rescuing of children." And so when she gave it to me, and I just wept, and I didn't know that story till a year later after we had started our first home with 52 kids. I said, "Did you know that you sent me out on my destiny? Did you know?" And she said, "Lana, that was my couch money. I was going to go and get a couch after service, and God said to give you my couch money."
Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. That's just a testament to you never know what one single act of obedience can do to just spark just amazing, life-changing ripple effect. Yes. Not only your life, but in all the lives that you have impacted. And so
all this
obedience, it's amazing.
I say it like this. I say, there's faces on the other side of your obedience. There's faces on the other side of your yes. There are always, your yes is never just for you. Your yes will always affect people. Your obedience will always affect people. There are faces on the other side of your yes and your obedience every time.
Amazing. That's so good. And I tell people, I speak 3 languages. I speak English, Spanish, and movie quotes. I just love film and narrative storytelling. And so one of my favorite shows growing up was this TV show called Lost. And what really drew me in was they had these flashbacks, or Quantico, right? Your Quantico TV show. They had these flashbacks on the characters, and you really got to know why they did what they what they're currently doing because of their flashback of their childhood and how they grew up. And so I would love to hear your flashback. Why are you passionate about rescuing people? I know the title of this podcast is Rescued to Rescue. Yeah. If you can give us a little flashback on your testimony and what sparked that passion to rescue people.
Yeah. So I was 19, and just really living a fast life. Like I said, I never had heard the gospel. My parents got divorced, and even they just had me at a young age. So they didn't ever bring us to church. My grandma would bring me to church on Christmas and Easter. And so I thought I had all the Jesus there was. I didn't know that there was any other way. Kind of just grew up really fast. And just started living a real destructive life with go-go dancing in the clubs of Hollywood. I became a dancer for Baker Boys, the Power 106 radio station, and just saw a lot of things really fast. And I thought this was my lot in life. This is my only choice. I didn't know I had an option. And one day we were doing a Hollywood club premiere, a big one, and all my friends were dancers, and they were either, they're either go-go dancers or their boyfriends were the bouncers or something at these clubs. So it was always a big event. And we're getting ready to do a big Hollywood club premiere with the Baker Boys. There was a bus that would come and pick up all the dancers, and we go to these clubs. And we were getting ready. It was a huge thing. And all of a sudden, something on the inside of me said, "Pick up the phone and call your aunt." And I didn't know what that something was that was drawing me. Now I know it was God's Spirit drawing me to him, but I didn't know what that was at that time. So I just walked over the phone, picked it up, and called called my Aunt Dory. And my Aunt Dory had become a Christian 6 months before. Wow. But her whole life was changed, her and my uncle, and they didn't cuss or drink at the Mexican family barbecues anymore. So we thought, you are definitely a cult. There's something wrong with you. And so we're just like, and we kind of ostracized them and just, and so I hadn't talked to her for 6 months, and I used to be super close with her. And I picked up the phone and I said, Aunt Dory, can I come over? And I just made something up because I didn't know why I was calling her. And I said, you just dye my hair or something? And she's like, sure, honey, come over. It was a Friday night. And she said, sure, honey, come over. So I came, we pulled up. All of a sudden, my aunt and my cousins were walking out, and I was coming in. I said, where are you going? I just got here. And she said, we're going to church. Do you want to come? And I was like, church? And I said, on a Friday night? Like, don't only old people go to church on a Friday night, And they laughed, and they're like, no. And I never stepped foot in a Christian church before, never in my life. Like I said, 19 years old, I'd never heard the gospel in its entirety. I never had a Christian friend. I never knew, nobody ever told me or invited me to Christian church. And she said, no, why don't you come with us? And I said, okay, I'll go. I'll try. Okay, sure. I did not know my whole life would change. I did not know anything like that. I remember calling my friends and saying, hey, I'm going to go to church first before I go to the Hollywood Club premiere. I'll meet you down in Hollywood. And they said, Lana, are you crazy? What are you, church? What are you talking about? And I said, don't worry. It'll be like over in an hour. I'll be down in Hollywood by 10. Don't you worry. It's fine. I got it all under control. And they're like, just don't be late. This is a big deal, right? And so anyways, so they didn't, and my aunt's like, okay, well, honey, we need to kind of change your clothes. You can't go to church dressed like that. I was dressed to go out. And so I went. I just remember we changed clothes, cleaned me up. We went to church. We went to church Friday night. We walk in, and I saw people my age worshiping, and just their hands were lifted, and tears were streaming down their face. And I'd never seen anything like that. And I was like, wow, what is this? This is different. I've never seen this. They look like me. They looked very normal. And I just thought, what is happening? They were young. And I thought, and I didn't understand it, but something on the inside of me felt something that I hadn't felt in a long time. And it was like peace. And I'm like, what is this? I don't understand it, but it feels so good on the inside. And I remember the preacher got out, and he was young, and I thought preachers were old, and he was young and he was cute. And I was like, I thought they were old and bald. And so I was so intrigued. And, but at that moment he started preaching the gospel, and he said, you've been trying to fill that hole in your heart with drugs, with alcohol, with everything else in this world that could never satisfy you. But don't you know what you've been looking for this whole time? His name is Jesus. He's standing here tonight at the door of your heart knocking. And if you open it up, you'll never be the same again. You'll never thirst again. And I just remember at that moment, it was like an old Hollywood film reel. And it had every scene like a movie. And every scene had a picture where I was looking for love or happiness or peace. And it was just empty. I had the career girl scene, the college girl scene, the living with your boyfriend, the clubs, the different things. I had every scene, and it was real. It was scenes that I was in. It was like those flashbacks that you're telling of my life. And it was, and the Lord was showing me how I was looking for him, for happiness, for love in all of those places. And the last one was blank. And you have to remember, I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't used to this. I literally saw it like in the air in front, and like I saw it with my eyes, and the Lord just played this in front of me. And he said, this movie of my life in front of me. And the last part of that old Hollywood reel was blank. And I heard that same voice that told me to pick up the phone and call my aunt say, the choice you make right now will change your life forever. And my cousin said that she went to ask me to go up, but that I had already ran up to the altar call. And I just remember praying this prayer. Nobody told me to pray this, but I just said, I held my hands out, and I just said, Jesus, I'm a mess. My heart, my mind, my body, it's in a million pieces. It's a mess. But if you can do anything with it, I give these million pieces to you, and I give this mess to you. And I just remember holding it out like my life and my heart and my mind and everything and just holding it out to Jesus. And I remember putting my hands, and nobody told me to do this. I just did it. And it was at that moment, it was like warm honey from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Wow. And wherever the honey touched, it cleansed and made whole and healed. And I was instantly delivered from drugs, instantly delivered from alcoholism. I felt just pure and white as snow. Like I'd never sinned, like nothing had ever happened to me, and I'd never done anything wrong. And I couldn't stop smiling. I couldn't stop crying. And I say it like this: it was like I saw in colors. I didn't realize I saw in black and white. It was like the sky was blue and the grass was green, and I could see in colors again.
Wow.
And the first scripture I ever turned to in my life at 19, or ever Bible verse I ever read was, he who is in Christ is a new creation. Old things pass away. Behold, all things become new. And I said, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. And I called my dancer friends and I said, I met the man of my dreams. His name is Jesus, and I'm never coming back. And they said to me, we don't know how you went from bar girl to Mother Teresa in 0.2 seconds, but you were the worst of us. And if he can save you and forgive you, then there's hope for all of us. And one by one, my go-go dancer friends started coming to the Lord, and my boyfriend, all of them. And actually, he's a children's pastor in my hometown in Simi Valley as well.
Wow.
Yes. And one by one, because they saw the transformation, I was instantly healed of epilepsy. I haven't had a seizure since I was 19 years old. My family started seeing it. So one by one, my family started getting saved. My mom, my dad, all of them. My dad got saved, taking me to Bible school. And so it was, God just did a huge work in my life. And at that moment, and this is how I kind of really got set in my destiny. And that's when I knew I was rescued to rescue, because it could have been anyone, like any of my friends, but it was me. And I knew that it was for a purpose. I knew it was for me, yes, but I knew it was for even a greater purpose. I knew that I was rescued to rescue. And at that moment, I remember just making two personal vendettas to God. One, I just remember at that altar, like just my heart with this resilience. One, I would tell as many people about Jesus before the age 19, because nobody ever told me, nobody ever gave me a chance. Nobody ever said, you don't have to live this life that you're living. There's another way. And at least give me a chance to reject Jesus, or give me a chance to say no to go to church, or give me a chance to not want a different life, or not want help. Nobody gave me a chance. They assumed that I would say no. And so one, I would tell as many people about Jesus before the age 19. And two, I would protect and fight for innocent and vulnerable children, because what had happened to me as a child. And I believe that the enemy really tries to go into to children at their childhood and really steal their purity, steal their innocence, and really get them on a path of destruction like me. And so I just said, with all my life, with every next breath, with every day that I have from my 19-year-old life until Jesus returns, that he would have my yes, he would have my obedience, and he gave me a second chance at life. So this life that I now live, I live for him. I lived for myself, and it didn't work. And I was on a fast lane to destruction. Wow. And now every breath, every life, every day would be lived for him and his purposes. And I knew those would be the two purposes, for evangelism and at-risk and vulnerable children.
Wow. That is incredible. Your testimony, my goodness, Lana. And my grandpa has an amazing testimony too. He was just grew up in a broken childhood, broken home. And he was a severe alcoholic. Yeah. And when he just finally hit rock bottom, it's the same thing, night and day. He had an encounter with the Lord, and he just gave his life to God. And God delivered him from alcoholism, from like cold turkey, from one day to the next. Didn't even desire the bottle, like no more. Yeah, same thing.
I love it.
Like, won't he do it? Won't God do it? It's just amazing. And now he lives his life for Jesus.
And so, look at the ripple effect of his grandchildren, his children and his grandchildren.
And now the legacy of faith that one decision started. And so God is amazing.
Yes, he is.
He is so good. And I want to talk about Life Impact International. are you wearing one of the shirts?
I am.
Yeah. For those who are watching on the video, go to lifeimpactinternational.org, right?
Yes.
We'll put it up on the show notes, and we'll have it on the screen on YouTube. But go to Life Impact International. cop the merch.
Yes. One of my kids in Thailand actually designed it.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that is amazing. But I want to talk about tell us about what's the impact happening in Thailand right now? And kind of we want to shed some light on the human trafficking in Thailand, and why do you think it's so prevalent in Thailand right now?
Yeah. So Thailand, actually, I started hearing about it 23 years ago, before sex trafficking, child trafficking, human trafficking was a hot topic.
Yeah.
This has been going on for a long time. I believe the two things that really fuel it, I believe one, it's corruption, within the government, corruption with the system. There's a few things, poverty, but you can still have poverty. And if you don't have the corruption and if you have a good family, they're not going to sell their children. But that can be another thing that fuels it.
Broken families
and mindsets. Wow. So I've in Thailand, there's just a mindset of, instead of children being your legacy and your future, children are a commodity. Children are, there's even a song in Thai culture. You gave me milk. So now that you can work, what can you give back to me? Like they sing it on Mother's Day. Now I will support you. You gave me milk. Now I will support you. Yeah. So it's this mentality, right? And the short-sightedness of not seeing children as legacy or their future and an investment, but seeing them as a quick return. And what can I get from your body right now? Or what can I get from you right now? So I feel like those are things that fuel it. The reason why it's so prevalent right now in Thai culture. And I see that also in Brazilian culture, and that's where we're at as well. But for Thai culture, I started hearing about Life Impact started when we started hearing about child trafficking, 8-year-olds going for Virginia going for $3,000. We started hearing about the red light districts in Bangkok. We started hearing businessmen going there with the myth of if they sleep with a child that they'll bring good luck to their companies. Another one, different myths of if you have HIV and you sleep with a child, they can take away HIV in different African cultures. Wow. And then also children, it's harder for them to carry HIV, and which are all myths. And so this kind of really fueled it, along with Bangkok being known as the armpit of the world for the largest red light districts in the world. Wow. And that as well fueled it. And prostitution just being so prevalent there. And it's number 1 in the world. Brazil's number 2 for exploitation against children, for children forced into prostitution. And we started hearing about this. I only committed actually 2 months to pioneer a prevention home. I was back in Bible school and I was just praying, okay, rescue to rescue. I know that. What does that look like? And I knew that I was supposed to do children's homes. I knew I was supposed to work with exploited children internationally. Like I knew these different things. And just, I say it like this, sometimes you don't get the full picture. Sometimes it's like you get the pieces, the pieces of the puzzle, and you get the end piece or the middle piece, and you have kind of an idea. Yeah. And God was giving me the pieces of the puzzle, which at the end it would be Life Impact International, where we prevent, rescue, and heal, reach, rescue, and raise up at-risk, vulnerable, and exploited children. Like that is the big picture now. But at that time, I was just getting pieces. So we thought, okay, how do we start? Let's start first with prevention. Yeah. We'd go into the highways and the byways. We'd go to the pools where the traffickers got these children. And at that time in Thailand, it was the villagers, because they uneducated. They didn't know anything about the cities, and they were just poor, impoverished. And so they'd come and the traffickers would say, we'll take your child to a restaurant. They'll work there. They'll work as housemates for a rich Thai family. We'll put them in school. They'll go to a Christian organization or a Christian boarding house, and they take their children and they'd be sold to the red light district, and they'd never see them again. And if you do the math, $3,000 for an 8-year-old's virginity. And, they say that human trafficking's already surpassing arms trade because, or the drug trade and drug trafficking, because drugs you only use once, but a child's body you can use over and over again. And that's what would happen to these children. They'd at 10 years old, 11 years old, as soon as they start getting formed, they'd start to groom them. And then as soon as they start getting, formed and developed, they'd make them sleep with at least 10 men a day and just break them, and then these little girls would get HIV, AIDS. And I mean, after that, they won't live that much longer. So their lives essentially just began, and then their lives are over, And so we started hearing about this and just knowing we had to do something, started our first prevention home with 52 kids. These were kids that would have been sold into the sex trafficking trade. We got to the villages before the bad guys did.
Wow.
And I was only supposed to be there 2 months. But there's this one little girl, she was 14 years old. She came up to me and she said, I don't have a mom and you don't have a daughter. From this day forth, you're my mom and I'm your daughter. Oh. And I couldn't leave those kids. And so 2 months turned into 6 months. 6 months turned into a year and a half. And a year and a half into it, the missionaries that I started the home for, they came to me and they said, Lana, these children's homes are draining our resources. There's so much money. And we do Bible schools and church planning. And we decided we're going to have to hand it over or close the homes because we can't do this. And I said, these children, we can't do this to these children. There's no way. Would you pray about giving the homes and the children to me? So at 24, I became mama to 52 kids. At 25 and a half, I became the owner, ding, 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 of an international anti-trafficking organization. Wow. And the rest is history. And so we started with the prevention. And then later, because at first I was knowing about rescue and different things. And so we tried to rescue at that point. But at one time, it was 2020 came out with something in Cambodia, and they did a whole underground thing and a whole underground sting operation. And all of a sudden, that was the first time anybody had ever heard about child trafficking, children forced into prostitution. And they did a whole underground thing. And the video came out, and little girls 7, 8, 9, boom boom for $3, $6, different things. And that came, people were flabbergasted. They couldn't even believe it. They were just blown away. And it was good because it started to bring awareness, but at the same time for us I was front lines at that time. Wow. And we're trying to go in and rescue from the brothels at the beaches in Thailand. And so what it did was it was good for awareness, but for us, it made us harder to rescue. Yeah. And so for a minute there, I just put rescue on the shelf and I said, okay, I'll do what I know to do. I'll prevent. I'll continue going into the highways and the byways. And we still do that to this very day. We still have weekly are doing prevention projects and going into schools and different places where the traffickers would pray and the pools where they would get their children. But that's how we started. That's what I focused on. I said, and when it's time to rescue, we'll rescue. And eventually what would happen, I think 6 years later, I thank God I needed to get some wisdom because I was young and I had zeal, but I probably would have got killed. And so, and I was only 24 and, which is great, but I just lacked wisdom. Yeah. And about 6 years later, we rescued our first 8-year-old girl for $24.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. I love numbers. I love connection to numbers. You started at 24 and you rescued a girl for 24.
Yes, I just got chills. I didn't even realize that. That's amazing.
And our favorite Bible verse that we're going to talk about later is Acts 20:24.
Yes, it is. That's all. I'm telling you, I never put those together.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's amazing.
It is.
I know you mentioned at New Beginnings when you were speaking about how some of you call them your children, the ones, and that those ones that you rescued are now grown up and rescuing others. Mm-hmm. That is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my first 8-year-old girl for $24. We've been doing this now 22 years. So I'm literally on my 3rd generation. I'm actually the youngest grandma that you will ever meet in your life. I have have like 5 grandbabies right now. I named them all. I have Raina. I have David Justice. We named them all. And so I have 5 grandbabies. But okay, so we had our prevention generation, and then we had that 8-year-old girl for $24. From that, it turned into 12 other children that were going to be sold that week, to 60 children, to now we have about 100. But that rescue generation in those early days of that 8-year-old girl sold for $24. Now they're my 24-year-olds. They're 22, 24, 26, around that age. And a lot of them now, they have nowhere else to go. People ask, do they age out of Life Impact? Yeah. But if I put them back, they will be re-trafficked. So they're ours, they're mine. That's why I call them my children. We raise them up until they can be proactive members of society, or until they get a job, a vocation, or they end up working at Life Impact. Yeah. And so now I have this whole generation. A lot of my first prevention generation, they're with me. One is my social worker that's on the anti-trafficking task force for Thailand. Another one is my daughter that does all the accounting and all of that. And she hosts, if you would come to Thailand, she'll host you. And another son from that prevention, that's our soccer coach, is our sports coach. And so I have that whole generation. But then I have the rescue generation, my 20-somethings. I call them my Timothys. And actually, they're on our worship team. They're our worship leaders. They're our Sunday school teachers. I have one little girl that's a fireball evangelist, and she goes into the same areas that she was rescued from and reaches children in those areas. Oh my goodness. They are interpreters. They work in the government along for rescue as well. Evangelist outreaches. A lot of them have gone through Bible school, and they're the hardest workers at our place, actually. And they're in all levels of ministry. One's a nurse. Some of them are working our daycare. Yeah. And actually, we rescued a family of 5, and the 2 older sisters that were forced housemaids, they're now our house parents. Wow. They got married, and she married another orphan, and they have 8 children. 6 of them are Life Impact children, and you should see them because they know what it's like to be sold and trafficked and orphaned. And they're some of our best house parents. So some of them are house parents, some of them are in our daycare, some of them are Sunday school teachers. But that is our heart. It's not just me being rescued to rescue, but we're rescuing and raising up a generation to also be the rescuers. Wow. And introduce them to the true rescuer, Jesus.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yes.
All the alliteration with the R's.
Yes.
Rescue, raising.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That is so amazing. And I know that you went to Thailand because of that mission trip that you took, but you always had a heart for Brazil. I know you mentioned that in your message. And because Latinas, we're Latinas, right?
Yes,
we the culture, we can blend in a little and relate to it. But tell us about how that got started, how you started off at Thailand and now you're working in Brazil now, right?
Yeah.
Working in Brazil. Yeah.
I'd love to. And I say it like this. So I never signed up for Thailand. Yeah. I did not like Thailand until about 5 years ago, I think. I was there in sheer obedience. Like you said, the culture is different. Yeah. We're loud and, touchy and feely, and they're reserved and they don't touch and they just why, and they eat rice every meal, and I want beans and barbecue.
Frijoles, carnitas.
Yes. And so it was opposite. I'm like, God, I do not belong here. I am a fish out of water. And for so long, I only loved my children and my team. That's all that I loved about Thailand at all, but I was obedient. And I say it like this, for now 22 years, I was faithful with what God put in my hands. Thailand and actually Burma, all the while holding Brazil in my heart. Yeah. Brazil is how I got called to work with exploited children internationally. Wow. I thought that was my first place I was going to go when I graduated Bible school. I actually didn't even know where Thailand was on the map. I had never even heard of Thailand. I thought I was only going to spend 2 months there. When I was in my itty bitty Church of God, there was a Brazilian missionary that came through, and he talked about the 300,000 street kids in the streets of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And he talked about seeing 5-year-olds walking around sniffing glue flu, not just because they're hooked on drugs, but to kill the hunger pains, because there's more children on the streets than there is food in the dumpsters. And they talked about the store owners paying off the police to line up these children and massacre them. And you could smell the bodies of rotting children in the sewages of Sao Paulo. I didn't know anything about the exploitation of children, the sexual exploitation of children. I just knew that. And I knew that at that moment, I was just weeping. And the pastor's wife came over to me, again, a piece of the puzzle, and said, Lana, what do you want to do for the Lord? And all of a sudden, out of my spirit, out of my mouth said, I want to work with exploited children internationally. And that aunt that I got saved with, she looked at me, she said, you do? And I said, I guess it's what I said, and it was all of a sudden, and that's when I was praying, okay, what does this look like? What is this piece? But I knew I was supposed to stay in Thailand. I knew I couldn't leave those kids. And so I just stayed faithful. And every year I would pray and say, God, is it time for Brazil yet? I wouldn't even, unpack my suitcase. I wouldn't even buy a bed. I wouldn't buy furniture because I thought one day I'm going to go to Brazil. So I'm not going to set up shop here in Thailand. And every year I'd say, is it time for Brazil yet? Is it time yet? Mm-hmm. And God said, no, not yet. No, not yet. No, not yet. Mm-hmm. And there came a time, and I say it like this, I laid down my Isaac on the altar. Mm-hmm. And what that means is, if you reference it to the Bible, Isaac was the child of promise. Mm-hmm. Isaac didn't dream up, Abraham didn't, and Sarah didn't dream up this by themselves. It was a promise from God that you will have a son. And so so when God, and I really feel like this is my own personal interpretation, but I feel like sometimes we fall more in love with the promise than the one who gave the promise. Wow. We fall more in love with our why and our purpose than the one who gave it to us. And we focus more on the promise than the promiser. And so I believe that sometimes every now and then God will have us lay down things that we are just getting a little too attached to, or a little too in love with. And I really believe that's what was happening in Thailand. We were having revival. These rescued children, my goodness, we would have just incredible nights where they'd get healed and delivered and set free. And it was just amazing what was happening. And I was loving it. And I was loving missionary, loving my life, loving it. And every year I'd say, I'd hear, is it time? Is it time? And it was like, no, not yet, not yet. And not until I would say about, my goodness, to the point where I started to finally love Thailand and love what I do and love everything. I heard the Lord say, okay, lay your Isaac on the altar, lay it down. And when it's time, I'll raise it back up. Wow. And I did that. And at that moment, a Brazilian pastor contacted me that I went to Bible school with. And he said, Lana, we read about you in a magazine. We heard what you're doing. The children of Brazil need you. Wherever you're at in the world, I was in Thailand, wherever you're at in the world, I will fly you to Brazil. Brazil needs Life Impact. I mean, and that's a long flight. It's that's a 28-hour flight through Dubai. It's insane. And so you feel drugged. Jet lag makes you feel drugged. It's so crazy. Yeah. But, and so he flew me there. And I, at that moment, I remember just landing, and I felt like God say, I've been preparing you for what was already prepared for you. Wow. And so this whole time in Thailand, I was trying to bypass it, but actually it was my preparation for what was already prepared for me. And while I was being faithful with what was in my hands, God was working on what was in my heart. Wow. God was taking care of it behind the scenes. As I was pioneering Thailand and Burma and being faithful with the children and the opportunities that were right in front of me, God was taking care of what I was carrying in my heart. There's a scripture in the Bible where it says in Psalms 36, trust in the Lord and do good. It's like, do the good that's in front of you. Commit your way to the Lord and he shall bring it to pass. And so it was just like, okay, do what he's put in my hands and let him bring to pass what's in my heart. And so I landed in Brazil and I knew, wow, okay, this is what I was prepared for. Thailand was it was like, I killed the lion, I killed the bear. And now who's this uncircumcised Philistine giant? It was like the lion and the bear. Yeah. And now this was Goliath. Brazil was Goliath. Wow. And what I started to see, it wasn't just street kids, but we realized when we were in Brazil, the stories even though I'd been working with child trafficking, child exploitation for all those years, the stories in Brazil I had never heard before. And those stories, I mean, ripped my heart. I brought my Thai daughter and she said, Mom, I don't think Thailand's number one in the world. I think Brazil is. And we realized somehow they got their numbers wrong. Somewhere somebody covered up something. And we really believe that Thailand's not number one in the world for child trafficking, child sexual exploitation. We believe that Brazil is right there up there, if not tied, then a very close second. And when we were there, we knew we needed to do something. And it's so funny. God's like, okay, now. And COVID happened and the whole world shut down. But we happened to start our projects during COVID. And in 4 years now, in 4 short years, we were at 38 staff in 3 regions in the Amazon, Rio de Janeiro, and the northeastern of Brazil, reaching 850 children weekly in 4 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is incredible.
Yes.
That is incredible. And I know you spoke, when you spoke at New Beginnings, you gave a little story about a drug. Was he a drug lord in Brazil that you encountered? Yeah.
So he is number 3 of the drug traffickers. So there's this cartel, and they're really known in Colombia. A lot of the weapons and drugs come from Colombia down into Brazil and vice versa. And so they're one of the most notorious, dangerous. And actually so back up a little bit. One of my girls, she's amazing. Her name is Thais. And she was, even though her father was a very wealthy, successful businessman, but on the weekends, he was a pastor in the favelas or the shanty towns, the most dangerous favelas. So she was raised with the rich and with the poor. And so she's used to going into favelas. They love her. She loves them. They're like, what are you doing here? So they love that she comes into the community, and she just has favor with drug traffickers, and her whole family does. And so she was going and she walked past a crack house and she said, that's it. Like, that's our prevention center. And she started talking to number 1 and number 2, the top of the most notorious drug cartel. I don't want to say the name, and started to talk to them, negotiate them. She just had a baby. And so she had her baby on her hip and she was negotiating for this crack house, and they gave it to us. And so we turned it into a children's prevention project.
Wow.
It's like a children's dream center, where we see right now about, I think it's 350 children weekly there. And so we had an inauguration, an opening day, and they sent the third in command. He's basically the money runner. He's very trusted. And so he's really high up there. He's the one that carries all the money. And he came and he was, videoing and taking pictures and different things. And we had about 850 children and some adults there too. And he was just looking around and he said, can I talk to you? And I said, yes, sir. And so, and I saw him, taking pictures, even of our license plates, just everything. And we get into this room and I don't know what's going to happen. We get into this because it was so loud. So we go into this quiet room and we start to talk, and he says to me,
hey guys, so we're going to end the podcast right there, and we're going to make it into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. I know we left you at a cliffhanger, but you make sure to tune into the next episode because it's so good. And make sure that you support Lana with Life Impact International. She's doing amazing things. And make sure for this podcast to leave a comment, subscribe, and share it to everyone you know. Thanks, guys.